it's Hailey Reese, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so grateful that you are here, and I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is one that is going to be absolutely bone chilling. We are diving headfirst once again into a haunted doll experience. Except today, we're diving into the Deal Maker's dolls. A doll maker that, whether or not truly exists, well, that's up for debate. But those who have purchased the Deal Maker's dolls claim that their world was never the same after. You see, these dolls are unlike any doll that you can buy online, in an antique store, or in your local store at all, because these dolls were created by hand with a specific deal in mind. One that typically those who purchase have no idea what exactly they are buying into, and the deal that had been made before the doll became theirs. You see, the real problem with these dolls, though, is that once you buy one, it truly seems there is no turning back. So if anything, let today's video serve as a warning that if you run into a deal maker and their dolls, you ask the proper questions before signing your name on the dotted line, handing something of yours over, or walking away with one of the dolls. So with all of that being said, sit back, relax, maybe turn a light on, because today's experience is absolutely terrifying and has left many unable to sleep without some sort of light on. All right, so today's story begins with a woman named Helen. Now, a quick story, or a quick backstory rather, on Helen that's rather important to this experience is that Helen moved away to this small town for a complete fresh start. This was the closest thing that Helen could reach to a brand new identity. You see, she just went through an absolutely horrible divorce, but thankfully there was no children attached to it. And she felt like this little town, miles and miles and miles away, was her start at something completely new. She decided to take on her middle name in the town, work a job unlike anything she'd ever worked, and more so, completely keep to herself. Because after the chaotic, dark, and traumatizing recent years she'd endured, Helen was really chasing a silent, fresh start, one where she flew under the radar. So friendships and raising any flags towards her existence were absolutely not on Helen's list of things to do. Again, she'd gotten a job in the town, but kept her head down pretty much all of the time, only talking with the customers when she really felt that she needed to. Where Helen worked, it kind of seemed like everybody knew everybody, and so she wasn't the first one that anyone went to for help anyway. So after a couple of months of living there, when an old lady in almost a cloak-like attire would approach her, she found it odd and decided to see what it was the lady needed. You see, normally when somebody who didn't really know what they were looking for would come to Helen, she'd point them in the direction of a colleague, somebody with more experience. But there was something in this traveler's eyes that drew Helen in. And that was when she struck up a conversation that was quite unusual. The woman called herself a traveler and claimed that she'd been traveling for weeks, but had finally landed upon this town. That she was really excited to be there because the deal maker was coming with his dolls. I'm sure that she could notice the look on Helen's face as to complete confusion, because that was when she proceeded to ask Helen if she'd heard of the deal maker and his beautiful dolls. Helen began to tell the woman that no, she'd never heard of the Dealmaker and his dolls. And while Helen had tried to remain under the radar and not ask too many questions or bring any attention to being a newbie in town, this particular woman intrigued her. And something about the Dealmaker and the dolls sounded interesting. So against her better judgment, Helen decided to ask the woman who the Dealmaker was and what these dolls were. That was when the woman would tell Helen that for the last 100 years, once a year, under a very specific full moon, the Dealmaker and his dolls would come to town. She said they would position themselves on a specific street at a specific time and have a limited selection of the dolls. She told Helen that these dolls were very special because the Dealmaker made a deal to give these dolls the most magical, incredible lives. She said collectors came from all across the world to find the Dealmaker and his dolls, and should he bless you with one of his dolls, well, your world will just never be the same. Now, Helen is obviously intrigued by this, as most people would be, and she makes a mental note of what the woman taught her of the Dealmaker and his dolls. And a couple of days later, as she awakes, she can't help but remember it's the day of the Dealmaker. And up she gets, and off she wanders as the moon is rising towards where the Dollmaker is supposed to be. She said she was surprised at just how many people seemed to be looking at these dolls. There were all sorts of dolls, some that resembled voodoo or dolls that were used in some sort of spiritual practices. But there were other traditional collectible dolls and regular baby dolls. And that was when she noticed one doll sitting alone at the end of the display. This doll had dark short hair and dark eyes. Eyes that looked into Helen's soul and told some sort of a story. Helen said that she immediately felt drawn to the doll and slowly walked towards it. And that was when she started admiring all of the little details on the doll. There were little symbols embroidered into the dress. There were little markings on the doll, but something in the eyes just stood out to Helen. And that was when the Dollmaker appeared straight before her. The Dollmaker looked Helen up and down and gave her a smirk, reaching for the doll and outreaching it towards her. Helen looked at this Dollmaker and explained that she had no money to give, that she was new to town and that she had just came out of curiosity, but that she certainly didn't have any extra funds to spend on these beautiful dolls. And that was when the Dollmaker said, "Well, it's already done. You see, the doll has chosen you," and once again reaches their arms out to pass the doll to Helen. Helen said that she wasn't a spiritual person, but had she have been, every instinct in her body was telling her not to touch the doll. But the moment that she did, she knew within her the doll had binded to her. Well, she didn't understand the depths of the doll quite yet. There was a real element of attachment. And as she got home, she placed the doll in her living room up on the fireplace mantle, where the doll was set to remain. That evening, in the middle of the night, Helen would awake to what sounded like whispers downstairs. These whispers carried through her home until eventually she almost thought that she had heard her name. As the whispers continued, Helen began hearing footsteps walking towards the stairs. Knowing that she had 12 steps from the bottom of the stairs to the top, she heard what sounded like 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. And another 3 steps. 4, 5, 6. Going all the way up to number 9. Sure that somebody had broken into her house, Helen arose out of bed and ran to the stairs, where she would notice a shadow on the stairwell. As her eyes adjusted, Helen would notice that there on the 9th step was the doll, just sitting there, lifeless. Now, Helen knew it was a doll, and she knew she had placed the doll up on the fireplace mantle. But somehow she'd heard these whispers and had heard someone climbing the stairs. Helen thought that somebody had broken into her house and moved the doll and actually searched the house high and low. This would happen for 3 more nights. And on the 3rd night, Helen would call local police, telling them she was certain that someone was breaking into her home. The following night, Helen would hear whispers once again. And that was when she would wake up to a sharp pain shooting down her neck. As she sat up in bed, sitting at the base of her bed was the doll. As she jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom, Helen would notice that there was 3 scratch marks down her neck. Every night, this doll would move to various positions throughout the room. And as the nights went on, Helen's dreams started changing. This doll would call out to her, claiming her, telling her that all she had to do was surrender, to fully let it in. One night, Helen would have a dream where she would get up from her bed and walk towards the bathroom. There, she would hear the whispers, telling her to look at them closely. As she would slowly lift her head to look into the bathroom mirror, to her horror, behind her was a shadow-like figure gaining closer and closer. And as it got closer, she awoke to a loud crash in her bathroom. As she shot out of bed and ran to the bathroom, she would notice that the mirror that she was dreaming about was shattered. And as she slowly turned back in a daze, sitting up on her bed where she had just been laying, was the doll. Helen claimed that she felt like she was going absolutely crazy. So she grabbed the doll, she put it into the back of her car, and she drove it to a field by her. There, she made a makeshift fire pit in a trash can and broke the limbs off of the doll, tossing it down into the trash can and lighting the doll on fire. There, Helen stood, watching the doll slowly burn, until it was nothing but ash in the bottom of a trash can. And that was when she got up and walked away and got back in her car and drove all the way back to her house. She climbed into bed. She went to sleep. She woke up. And as she went downstairs the next day, to her horror, the doll is back on the mantle. And the mirror is still broken. Meaning that what she had experienced couldn't have possibly been an entire dream. I mean, some of it could have been, but the mirror was in fact broken. When she went to work the following day, she felt like it was finally time to tell somebody about what had happened, and to her shock, those that she worked with, who had been locals for their entire lives, had never heard of this doll maker who comes once every year for the last 100 years. As she started asking around the town, it appeared that nobody had heard of this doll maker, and nobody had heard of the woman who had recommended him to her. That night, she brought one of her coworkers back home to show them the doll and explain to them exactly what the doll had done to her. And to her horror, when they arrived back home, the doll was nowhere in sight. It was as if the doll had in fact been destroyed. Now she claims that everybody looked at her like she was crazy, and she decided to pretend that it was all some sort of a joke and her weird way of trying to make friends or something. But the way that they looked at her, they knew that something had truly happened, and that there was no way this doll was a joke. Now in the night, she'll still hear the whispers, and in her dreams, the dark figure gets closer. Every time she glances in a mirror, she sees a shadow in behind her. And sometimes she swears that she sees the doll in various places throughout her house. But what's going to happen next to her, she has no idea. Because the last time she saw the doll was only 2 months ago. And the dreams have only been getting worse. What are these dolls by the deal maker? Who is the deal maker, and who was the woman who had told Helen about these dolls? Or is it like everybody else thinks? Is Helen just truly going crazy. I want to know from you guys what you think, but the idea that this doll is out there somewhere leaves many believing that there is some sort of evil on the loose that could turn up anywhere at any time. What do you guys think of the deal makers dolls and this particular haunted doll experience? I would love absolutely nothing more than for you to comment down below any and all thoughts, theories, opinions that you have. I always love hearing your guys' thoughts on paranormal cases like this because honestly, even when I can kind of imagine where I think things are going, you guys always take it to that next level and just bring my brain to spaces that it never would have went otherwise. So definitely let me know what it is that you are thinking down below. And that is it for today's experience. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed, but you do enjoy my content, I would love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until tomorrow, I love you. Bye, guys.